So I've been asking myself this question. What's the difference between a fortress and a prison? They actually share some of the same characteristics, you know. Both are built to be as impenetrable as possible. Both are meant to keep people on one side of the edifice or the other. One to keep the supposedly dangerous out, and one to keep the supposedly dangerous in. So what's the difference between a fortress and a prison? It's interesting how different people talk about the situation that we're in, isn't it? Many of us talk about sheltering in place. That's the line we've been using, sheltering in place. Our homes have become our shelter, our fortress, keeping us as safe as we can possibly be from the dangers of the virus that spreads so quickly out in the rest of the world. But I'm wondering if our true feelings about all of this are beginning to come out, because we're beginning to talk about other states with less restrictive orders for how they move around. And lately, I'm hearing a lot more often, lockdown. Lockdown. Are we in shelter? Or are we in lockdown? Fortress or prison? The problem with edifices of human creation is, I think, that eventually most of us will feel like that fortress has turned to a prison if we're mandated to be there for too long. And for some groups, that's what it feels like. They're breaking out of what was meant to be fortress, feeling imprisoned and demanding that they have freedom to move around, to decide their own fate, while others rail against them, calling them selfish and dangerous. And ironically, I just need to say this, on my Facebook group, both groups are calling the others COVIDiots. So, at least we are unified in our language, right? If not, who is a COVIDiot and who is not? Now, before I am accused of sitting on the fence or of not being able to stand against anything, let me say loudly and clearly that I think blocking ambulance paths to hospitals is absolutely wrong. I think this false narrative that has led people to walk around with weapons capable of killing 50 people in a minute has to stop. And that show of force meant to intimidate has to be recognized as a threat to public safety. Let me say also that I see clearly the multiple disparities of walking in this world. I see that black men right now are afraid to mask themselves as the rest of us are doing, for fear that they will be mistaken for criminals and killed, as they have been too many times before. I recognize that Native people protesting without weapons on a wide open prairie were met with military force rather than negotiation. That nuns and clergy are routinely arrested for protesting peacefully against the mistreatment of asylum seekers and of those living in poverty. And then I see, on the other hand, white guys with enough guns and ammunition to destroy everything around them are met with silent guards. And let me say that I believe that we cannot have individual freedom unless those who are free willingly accept personal responsibility for damage to others that is sometimes inherent in their choices. And I think that connection is too often missing in that whole freedom conversation. On the other hand, When do we start listening to each other? When do we stop using name-calling? What's the difference between a fortress and a prison? Perhaps the greatest difference lies in the perspective of the people who are on one side of the wall or the other. And if we could break through that wall, would it change our perspective? Even just a little bit? Would we be able to hear the voices on the other side of the wall? Now, I was raised with this natural leaning toward curiosity. But there's another piece, because I followed Jesus, who seemed to be able to sit with the poor and the outcast, as well as the tax collectors and some of the Pharisees. And so I kind of feel like it's my responsibility to take some time every once in a while to sit in that in-between space. Maybe it's the watchtower of the fortress. That space where I can see what's happening on both sides of the wall. And here's the thing, in most of our ideological divides, not just this one, but in most of our ideological divides, I see a tremendous amount upon which we agree. And I have to acknowledge just how similar we are, whether we feel like we're in a fortress or feel imprisoned. On either side of the wall, we live with very real frustrations about the direction our lives are taking, or the directions our lives might take on a moment's notice. On either side of that wall, it feels like someone else is unfairly pulling the strings at times. On either side of that wall, we fear very real dangers to our health and to our livelihoods. But also, on either side of that wall, we all want to find love and feel loved. We want to care for our children and raise them to be good citizens. We want to serve our neighbors and enjoy God's creation and live good and faithful lives. Whether we feel safe in our fortresses or trapped in our prisons, we are all created and loved by and forgiven by and held by the very same God. Don't let your hearts be troubled. You have faith in God. Have faith in me as well. In God's house there are many dwelling places. Otherwise, how could I have told you that I was going to prepare a place for you? I am indeed going to prepare a place for you. And then I will come back and take you with me, that where I am, you may be as well. How often I have read those words at someone's funeral or memorial service. How often I have imagined with the people gathered that place we reside after death. But what about now? Even now in this place, will we not let our hearts be troubled? Because we trust that in this world and in the next, Christ prepares a place for us in the presence of God. It is true that God gives the gift of wisdom to many, many people, that we should listen to those who have studied this world and have insight into how it works, that we should take their advice to heart so that we will be safe and secure through this time as we can be. It's also important to remember that the fullness of our security, the fullness of our confidence to walk through this world rests on the knowledge that in the end, our human vision, our human understanding, and yes, our human fortresses will not hold us forever. Only the Holy One, the Creator of the universe, can do that. It is in God that we take confidence, and in God that we find our shelter. Hear the words again. I take refuge in you, Lord. Please never let me be put to shame. Rescue me by your righteousness. Listen close to me. Deliver me quickly. Be a rock that protects me. Be a strong fortress that saves me. You are definitely my rock and my fortress. So guide me and lead me for the sake of your good name.